This is He Who Moans, Doctor Who reviews. I only complain because I like Doctor Who and I care. And I overanalyze too much because, whatever, it's just my opinion. Alright, I was a little harsh in my 6th Doctor video, but since people seem to get on my case about that one, I never said that the 6th Doctor was bad. I never said that Colin was bad as the 6th Doctor. Hell, I never said the 10th Doctor was a bad Doctor, just I have issues with him and tend to dislike the direction they went. I stand by everything that I said about the 6th Doctor's era, but I never said that I had issue with the 6th Doctor and Colin himself. I had issue with the 6th Doctor that they were selling to us, and the 6th Doctor that was written in the on-screen adventures in the 80s. There is a difference between those two. The issue isn't with the idea of the 6th Doctor, as much as it is with the direction the creative team behind him went during his era. I don't think any actor has been miscast as the Doctor. If any of them were miscast, it's definitely Peter Cushing. And that's not a slight on Cushing, as anyone with 2 brain cells knows that he was a great actor. Just not right for that role, really. So, yeah, Colin was a great choice for the Doctor, but the character that they wrote wasn't the Doctor. At times, he came across like some prick who had clawed his way into his skin, which was odd to watch. And like with my complaints on Tennant, literally all of my complaints are based on what some prick in marketing decided the character needed to be, which was based on bullshit assumptions and terrible decision making. And Colin, he did shine through the awful scripts he was handed. Just what they needed more than anything was sharper writing and realise that there's a point where grumpy and dignified ends and just being a mean bastard begins. Enter Bigfinish, who gave the 6th Doctor a bunch of awesome stories to make up for his lacklustre run on the show and eventual firing, and severely toned down the dick factor. Jubilee is probably the main Bigfinish story for the 6th Doctor that springs to mind, as it was the basis for Dalek from season 1 of the new series. And by basis, I mean basis, as none of the plot-setting characters' dialogue or scenes actually made it into Dalek. Well, sort of, 1 or 2 scenes did a bit, I guess. But Jubilee is a very different story, and it's probably one of Bigfinish's best. It's got lots of metafiction elements in it, which is one of the things that writer Rob Shearman just does. It's his thing. The rather generic description on the CD and on the site is intentional, and it's got some hilarious uses of Daleks that, if it were done on TV, the question of whether Doctor Who and humour really fit together wouldn't be a question. The Daleks singing their song, and when the Doctor shows up they shout, "Scarpa, Scarpa," is just gold. And yes, there's a reason for both of those. Listen, it's awesome. Shearman also penned the earlier Holy Terror, which is mostly famous for being one of the few plays to include Frobisher, a companion from Doctor Who comic books, who is a shape-shifting alien who primarily takes the form of a fucking penguin. Okay, if you just heard that there is a Doctor Who companion who is a fucking shape-shifting penguin, and you didn't immediately go to bigfinish.com and click buy and didn't start a Facebook petition for someone on the Doctor Who staff to ask what the hell is wrong with me and bring back the motherfucking shape-shifting penguin. A shape-shifting penguin who was a private investigator and spoke like a detective from a 1950s film noir. Girl from present-day Earth? What should the next companion be? I know, a girl from present-day Earth. Next one? Girl from present-day Earth. Next one, girl from present-day Earth. Next one, how about another girl from present-day Earth? Next one, I know, how about a fucking shape-shifting, mystery-solving penguin? But yeah, Holy Terror is brilliant in every way. Starts out a comedy, takes a few really dark turns, and goes predictably, as Rob Shearman, really meta towards the end, and I was hanging on its every word. Shearman also penned a bonus release with Frobisher called The Maltese Penguin. It's only an hour long, and it sets Frobisher on his home planet of talking animals, solving a murder mystery, and it does really make me think that the next spin-off should be a Saturday morning kids cartoon featuring the Doctor and Frobisher solving crimes. There's another idea that would beat the shit out of Torchwood. What you'll notice if you listen to the Sixth Doctor's Bigfinish plays is he has a new companion. Since we have that chronologically questionable period in Trial of a Time Lord, he could easily have been doing stuff for hundreds of years there, so they did have liberty to give the Sixth Doctor hundreds more adventures. So they decided to do the obvious thing and give him a new companion, and so we had a history professor named Evelyn Smythe, played brilliantly by Maggie Stables, who fits really well with Colin's Doctor and was kind of what was needed to balance out the Sixth Doctor's dickishness, and kept him outmatched in terms of the bitchy comment here and there, and they bounce off each other really well. She's basically like someone's mum travelling in the TARDIS, really, which is a much better idea than thinking a spaceship powered by people who can give birth is feminism and pro-mum, or whatever really shallow excuse Moffat pumped out for that easily misconstrued "Jesus, what the hell were you thinking?" Evelyn's been in loads of Bigfinish plays so far, but her and the Doctor's adventures are best experienced the way I did, starting with the Marian conspiracy and just following it through the way you would have done with the classic series. Another often highly recommended one is Davros. This was part of the Villains trilogy where the writers would have a companionless Doctor face off against a well-known villain, and sort of humanise and characterise the villain a little bit better. Because as much as we love Davros, face it, he was never really a character. It picks up where we last left Davros at the end of Genesis of the Daleks, and it does require that context. But if you claim to be a Doctor Who fan and have never seen Genesis of the Daleks, I'm going to assume that you're joking, or you're just not trying hard enough. And setting Davros in a situation without the Daleks was a nice touch, letting us focus on the man behind the facial burns and wheelchair. It's also got a pretty decent setup around it regarding Space Corporatocracy, and it features the last Doctor Who related performance by Bernard Horsfall. So now the obvious question is, what changed? Apart from the writers. Colin's character was severely rewritten by Bigfinish to remove all that self-aggrandising twattishness that we saw on screen, and aside from Colin's voice sounding a lot warmer and friendlier with his age, I'd mostly say that was down to the Bigfinish writers not being in the same position the writers were in 1986. Who was to blame for the series' downfall and Colin's turbulent first year is a difficult question, and you'd think I'd be opting for the writers, which would make sense based on the staggering difference between the on-screen ones and the audios. Most people point the finger at JNT, which is a bit like pointing the finger at hard drugs. Actually, it is basically just pointing the finger at hard drugs. That's what killed Doctor Who. And blaming JNT may be appropriate to some extent. I'm sceptical of that though, because just before the start of his era as exec producer on the show, it saw the ratings high point in City of Death Part 4, which in terms of UK figures still hasn't been bested to this day. Yeah. Following that, upon his taking the role the next year, he managed to last about 4 years before the criticism started to get so relentless, so this accusation of the man who killed Doctor Who doesn't really hold water to me. Peter Davison's Who was still fairly popular at the time, and still a ratings smash, and while I'm not a big fan of his era, it was still fairly solid on the whole. So, yeah, while JNT is definitely a factor, he's only one of many. Hell, I don't even necessarily blame the writers of, say, Time Lash, Mark at the Rani, or that abomination, Twin Dilemma. I'd mostly put it down to people forgetting the need to maintain the series' popularity. Doctor Who's downfall was a result of brash arrogance and pig-headedness. It was so unbelievably popular that they could just do whatever they saw fit, and everyone would lap it up anyway. This sort of thinking would eventually get the show killed off, in my opinion. The first 20-odd years were a series of trials, tribulations, and director-generals who didn't really understand the appeal of the show or why it was popular, and the people working on it going against the grain and doing it for the love of it. And by 1986, they thought they were untouchable. That's why after Twin Dilemma sucked so much, things were just free to meander about during Colin's run because, hell, not every Doctor Who story always turned out great, right? Maybe we'll get our ratings smash again, right? We were always a show of trial and error, right? Right? This is why I'm so harsh on New Who so much. If we let fanboys get too many tongue stains over stories that, on the whole, just aren't very good, then that'll let management think the series is as untouchable as it seems, and the past will repeat itself. It's not that the people involved with it are bad at what they do, and the episodes I bash are 100% across the board, no questions asked absolute crap. It's ego that screws with the mechanics of Doctor Who, and what Bigfinish did with the Sixth Doctor proves my point, that arrogance is what went so unbelievably wrong, and what might go so unbelievably wrong again. Bigfinish know humility. They recognise their smaller audience and are doing it for the love of it. Whereas in 1985, they had an average audience of about 10 million people and all eyes and expectations on them after 22 years of a massive lucky streak. Stuff goes wrong if you let things go to your head. It happens. But overall, Bigfinish did a very good job in making up for it.